Welcome back to the deep dive. We dig into the research so you don't have to. Today, we're tackling Principal Financial Group, that's ticker PFG on the NASDAQ.
Yeah, a real financial giant, isn't it? Been around for 145 years.
Exactly. And as of our analysis date, September 23, 2025, the stock's sitting at $82.21. The big question, and it's a common one for these legacy companies, is can this relationship-driven fortress actually thrive today, with all the digital pressure and fee compression?
Well, that's the core tension, right? And what's really interesting, I think, is how the market seems a bit unsure. Our deep dive, following, a pretty disciplined value approach, puts the intrinsic value somewhere between, let's say, $84 and $92 per share.
So trading just below that range.
Just below, yeah. And the main reason for that potential undervaluation seems to boil down to one thing: incredibly strong free cash flow. It's accelerating, actually, and the market just doesn't seem to be giving it enough credit.
Okay, so that's our mission today. Why is Wall Street maybe a bit skeptical about a company that's generating so much cash? We need to break down PFG's business, look at the leadership, check the risks, and figure out what it's really worth. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Business Analysis. Understanding the PFG machine. How does a company this old actually make money today? It looks like a mix of fees, premiums, investment income.
Yeah, it's really built on three core segments working together. Think of it like a three-legged stool. The biggest leg, the foundation, is Retirement and Income Solutions, or RIS. That's their core 401k business, mainly for small and mid-sized businesses, SMBs.
Okay, the SMB focus.
Right. And within RIS, they're pushing into more complex, higher margin stuff like pension risk transfer, PRT. That's a big growth area.
And I assume that retirement relationship then feeds the other parts of the business.
Exactly. It's the entry point. The second leg is Principal Asset Management, their global investment arm. They manage a huge amount, $723 billion in assets under management. And a lot of that AUM flows directly from those RIS retirement plans. People's 401k money gets managed by Principal.
Makes sense. And the third leg?
That's benefits and protection. Think specialty workplace insurance, dental, vision, disability, high margin stuff. And crucially, it's cross-sold right back to those same SMBs that have the retirement plans. It creates this really sticky ecosystem.
Okay, so that sounds like a classic competitive moat, right? Get them in with the 401k, then layer on asset management and insurance. Makes it really hard for clients to leave.
That's the synergy, precisely. High switching costs. And they're huge in this space. A top 3 defined contribution record keeper by participants in the U.S. Plus, the barriers to entry are just enormous. You need billions in regulatory capital for insurance. You've got the 145-year brand trust and these deep relationships, like with over 900 third-party administrators. You can't just build that overnight.
Right, but isn't that integration also a potential weakness? 145 years of legacy systems trying to compete with nimble fintechs. Does the moat become a bit of a swamp?
That's definitely the risk. The constant need for digital transformation, investing in AI, it's absolutely critical just to stay competitive. They can't afford to stand still. But they do have some tailwinds. Things like the Secure 2.0 Act are pushing more retirement savings, and their asset management arm is well positioned for the huge growth in ESG investing. That's projected to hit, $53 trillion by 2025.
Okay, huge numbers. That really sets the stage for who's steering this ship. Let's move to Chapter 2, Management Evaluation, the captains of the ship.
Yeah, this is a strong point, actually. The CEO transition in 2025 to Deanna Strable looks really smooth.
She's an insider, right?
A deep insider. 35 years with the company, held something like 15 different roles, including CFO.
Yeah.
That kind of continuity and institutional knowledge is pretty rare and suggests, a very stable long-term approach.
And looking at their decisions, it seems like they're not just coasting. They've made some tough calls on capital allocation.
That's key. They weren't afraid to prune the portfolio. They got out of the capital-heavy retail fixed annuity and individual life insurance businesses.
Focusing resources where they have a better edge.
Exactly. Focusing on the core retirement and asset management areas where they have strong, defensible positions and better growth prospects.
Yeah.
Optimizing for returns.
And they've done some bolt-on acquisitions too, haven't they?
Right. The Wells Fargo Institutional Retirement Trust deal back in 2019 added significant scale. And more recently, in 2024, buying Ascensus's ESOP business employee stock ownership plans deepens their expertise in a profitable niche.
What about returning capital to shareholders? That's always a big focus for value investors.
Oh, yeah, they're very shareholder focused. They target a 40% dividend payout ratio, and they've got 13 straight years of dividend increases.
That's impressive.
Just in the last quarter, Q2 2025, they returned $320 million through dividends and buybacks. About $150 million of that was buybacks.
13 years of increases and a clear payout target that speaks volumes about management discipline and confidence. And speaking of value, if you're finding this deep dive valuable, do us a favor. Like and subscribe to Stock Analytics AI. For just $4.99 a month, members get priority access to our deep dives. We're planning to cover the entire S&P 500 over the next few months, and members get first dibs.
And if you just want one specific company covered, you can always drop us a super thanks on the video.
All right, let's crunch the numbers. Chapter 3, Financial Analysis. A deep dive into the numbers. PFG's market cap is around $18.28 billion. But the revenue looks pretty choppy, right? Big difference between 2022 and 2023.
Yeah, that revenue volatility is expected, partly due to market swings affecting asset values and fees, and partly because of those big divestitures we mentioned. Selling off business lines obviously impacts the top line in the short term. But here's where it gets really interesting, the cash flow. This is the aha moment we talked about earlier. While the GAAP earnings per share bounce around a bit, the free cash flow, or FCF, is not only strong, but it's been accelerating. It hit $4.53 billion in 2024.
$4.5 billion. On an $18 billion market cap. That gives it a price-to-free cash flow ratio of, what, just over 4?
Exactly, 4.25. It's incredibly low. And that's the anomaly. Why isn't the market valuing that cash generation more highly?
Could it be noise from the divestitures? Maybe the market thinks that cash flow isn't sustainable, that it's artificially inflated by selling off assets?
That's likely part of the skepticism, yes. Divestitures definitely muddy the waters for cap EPS in the short run, which might make some analysts cautious. But the underlying cash engine, the RS and asset management segments, is really persistent. That low PFCF ratio suggests the market might be miscategorizing PFG, maybe treating it more like a volatile industrial than a financial services firm with sticky, recurring fees.
Okay, interesting perspective. What about the balance sheet? I saw one number that looked, frankly, terrifying for a non-finance person, a current ratio of 0.24.
Yeah. That's a classic insurance company metric that looks weird if you compare it to, say, a retailer. It's completely misleading here.
How so?
Insurers don't need high short-term liquidity, like a company meeting weekly payroll from inventory sales. They hold long-term assets like bonds to match their long-term liabilities, like insurance claims decades from now. What really matters for their financial health is regulatory capital, like their RBC ratio and their overall leverage. And on that front, they look solid. The debt-to-equity ratio is quite conservative at 0.35.
Got it. So the current ratio isn't the right metric here. What about valuation on an earnings basis? The trailing PE is about 16.4, which looks a bit pricey compared to its history, right? Its 10-year average is closer to 11.
True, the trailing number looks high, but again, the past might be distorted by those divestitures and market swings. The forward picture looks much better. Analysts are projecting a forward PE somewhere between 8.9 and 9.5. That big drop implies significant near-term earnings growth is expected around 19–20%. So based on forward estimates, the current price looks much more reasonable.
Okay, so the internal picture is strong moat, disciplined management, potentially undervalued cash flow, but maybe some confusion around recent divestitures and standard metrics. What about the external view? Chapter 4, Market Sentiment. What is Wall Street saying?
Well, the mood is definitely cautious, kind of neutral, really. The consensus analyst rating is basically a hold or maybe even a reduce. The average 12-month price target is $86.90, which is only slightly above the current price.
But there must be disagreement if our value range is $84 to $92 and the average target is $86.90.
Oh, huge disagreement. That average target hides a massive range. Some analysts have targets as low as $62, others go up to $101.1. It really shows how differently people are interpreting that free cash flow story and the future growth prospects.
Interesting. But what's the stock itself doing? Price momentum.
Technically, it's actually looking pretty strong, despite the lukewarm ratings. The stock has been trading above both its 50-day and 200-day moving averages, so the price action is more positive than the analyst consensus might suggest.
Are there any specific recent headwinds analysts are pointing to?
Yes, and PFG mentioned this themselves. The economic outlook, particularly for their core U.S. business clients, is being dampened by policy uncertainty, and specifically the U.S.-imposed tariffs from 2025. That's seen as a drag on their clients' health.
Okay, that's a concrete external risk. Let's look at who actually owns the stock. Chapter 5, Ownership Structure. Who owns PFG?
It's overwhelmingly institutions. They hold about 75% of the shares.
Any major holders stand out.
You've got the usual suspects, Vanguard, BlackRock are big holders. But interestingly, Nippon Life Insurance from Japan also has a significant strategic stake.
What about insiders, management? Are they putting their money where their mouth is? Often insider ownership is low in these large caps.
The percentage is low, yeah, around 0.6% to 0.7%, but the activity is what's telling. Over the last 12 months, there's been significant net buying by insiders. They purchased a net total of about 257,000 shares.
That's a pretty strong signal, isn't it? Management buying their own stock on the open market usually means they think it's undervalued.
It's definitely a clear, bullish signal, yes. Shows confidence from the people who know the business best.
All right, time for the reality check. Chapter 6, Risk Assessment. Navigating potential headwinds. Besides cyber threats, which are always there, what are the big risks facing PFG?
I'd say two main external threats really stand out, and they're kind of related. First is just the relentless competition and fee pressure, especially in asset management.
Your race to the bottom on fees.
Exactly. Giants like Vanguard and BlackRock have immense scale advantages and are constantly driving down fees. That puts pressure on the margins of PFG's $723 billion asset management arm. It's a constant battle.
And the second major threat.
It links back to what we mentioned earlier, the macroeconomic environment, and specifically those 2025 tariffs. Because PFG is so focused on the SMB market, anything that hurts small and mid-sized businesses in the U.S. directly impacts PFG's clients. If those clients struggle, they might cut back on benefits, delay starting new retirement plans.
Which directly hits demand for PFG's core products.
Precisely. And that's compounded by their general sensitivity to the markets. When stock and bond markets do poorly, their fee revenue from asset management takes a hit automatically. Plus, you have the usual interest rate risks for the insurance side. Low rates hurt spreads. Rapidly rising rates can cause unrealized losses on their bond portfolios.
Okay, lots to consider there. Let's try to wrap this all up. Chapter 7, Conclusion. The investment thesis. Can you synthesize the bull versus the bear case for us?
Sure. The bull case really rests on, I think, three things. One, that durable competitive moat. We talked about the integrated model, the SMB focus, high switching costs. Two, disciplined management, proven capital allocation, the long dividend growth streak. And three, perhaps most importantly, that powerful, undervalued free cash flow generation.
And the bear case. The reasons for caution.
The bears would point to that intense fee compression, especially in asset management. They'd highlight the company's sensitivity to capital markets. And crucially, they'd emphasize that concrete macro threat, the 2025 tariffs, potentially squeezing their core SMB customer base.
So putting it all together, what's the final take on valuation? We said $82.21 versus an $84-$92 range.
Yeah, our analysis suggests the current price is reasonable, maybe slightly undervalued relative to that intrinsic value range. PFG looks like a high-quality, well-managed, shareholder-friendly company. But those external risks, particularly around the economy and the health of their SMB clients due to things like tariffs, mean you need to be cautious. It's not a screaming buy, perhaps, but definitely a high-quality business trading at a fair price, worth watching very closely.
That brings us full circle. You know, the report mentioned PFG invests over $320 million a year in technology, and it made me think. For any 145-year-old company, you've got legacy systems, right? So the provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. Can that massive $320 million annual tech spend actually modernize PFG's infrastructure fast enough? Fast enough to truly defend that moat against the new, agile, digital-first fintech competitors popping up all the time? That tension between legacy strength and digital agility, something to mull over.
Absolutely. And remember, members can suggest stocks they want us to cover in future deep dives in the comments. We do look at those suggestions.
Just a reminder, this analysis was generated by an AI system. It's for educational purposes only and should definitely not be taken as financial advice. Always do your own research or talk to a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions.